Welcome back to the Math Review. In this lesson, we're going to deal with solving and checking one-step equations, but only the equations that deal with multiplication and division. We'll write some notes down, we'll solve one multiplication and one division equation, and then we'll check each of those equations to make sure that our solution is correct. So let's make a few notes first. So our goal primarily is always to do the following. Number one, our goal is to isolate the variable. Isolate the variable. And isolate is just a fancy word meaning to get it alone, to get by itself, to get alone. So if we see the variable w in an equation, then we're trying to get that variable w by itself. If we see a variable x in an equation, we're trying to get that variable x by itself. Now the question is, how exactly do we isolate the variable? Well, we have to use these things called inverse operations. And inverse operations are just opposite operations. So for example, if I had addition, then the inverse operation for addition is subtraction. And the inverse operation for subtraction is addition. But in this lesson, we're just focusing on multiplication and division. So if we had some question that had multiplication, the inverse of multiplication would be division. And the inverse of division would be multiplication. And that's 2. And number 3, we should always end up with a solution. Now, a solution is a fancy mathematical term, which just means the answer, the only value that will make an equation true. Okay? And it will always have the format variable equals value. So for example, your solution should look something like x equals 4, or something like y equals 7. Something like that, where you have a variable on one side and a value on the other. Now, if you want to take that and you want to flip it around, for example, if you want to say something like 7 equals y, that's perfectly acceptable, as long as you have a variable on one side and a value on the other. Now, let's get an equation to solve. So let's say we have 3x equals 21. I'm going to zoom in on just the equation that we want to solve. So let me just zoom in on that. Okay. Move it over a little bit. Okay. So we're trying to solve this. And whenever we're solving an equation, the best thing to do is to separate the left side from the right side. And in order to do that, we should drop a bar to the left side of the equal sign and the right side of the equal sign. It'll look something like this. So I'll find my equal sign, and then I'll draw a line down the left, and then I'll also draw a line down the right. Now this separates my left side of the equation from my right side of the equation. And then we have to think about what operation we see. This is kind of tricky because you don't see a plus sign or a minus sign or a multiplication or division sign. What operation do we have here? Well, whenever we have a coefficient, which is the number in front of a variable, and a variable right next to it, that automatically means that we are using multiplication. And I'll indicate that multiplication with a dot. Okay? This really means 3 times x. So what's the inverse operation of multiplication? Well, the inverse operation for multiplication is division. So I'm going to use division in order to solve this. Now, there's a standard way of showing this, and then there's another way that I like to show this. Some students get confused when you draw a line to represent division. So the way I like to show it, even though it's not technically proper notation, is I like to put the division symbol here. So I like to put divides by, and that exact value, 3. Okay, and then whatever we're doing to the left side, we're going to do to the right side, because remember that when we have equations, they're equal. So it's kind of like you have a scale, and you don't want that scale to teeter-totter. If we leave just this value here, the scale will tip that way. The only way for the scale and equation to be balanced is for you to have the same thing on the left side and the right side. So now we'll go to the right side and we'll put divided by 3. So now we go to this side. 3 divided by 3 will give you 1. So these will cancel. I'll draw a line through it to show that they cancel, because 3 divided by 3 is just 1. And then I can just bring down my x. So we've got 1x, which is the same exact thing as x by itself. So I can erase that and it'll be just fine. The next thing I'll do is I'll bring down my equal sign. And then I'll just evaluate 21 divided by 3. And 21 divided by 3 is just 7. Now remember what I told you before. If you have 1x by itself, 1x is the same exact thing as having x alone. So I can actually just erase that. And then I'll box my final answer. So therefore, the value of the solution is x equals 7. Now what we can do is we can take this and plug this value in for our check to make sure that it's correct. So let's zoom back out. And our check is going to start the same exact way as our solve part did. So I'm just going to write down the exact same equation, and that's going to be 3x equals 21. And then now wherever I see x, remember that our solution is right here, x equals 7. So now wherever I see x, I'm going to put 7, but remember 3x means 3 times x. And I like to put a little dot there to indicate that. So now I've got 3 times my value for x, which is 7, equals 21. And 3 times 7 is in fact 21. So 21, that's the left side of my equal sign. This is my right side of my equal sign. They match, and therefore this answer and this solution is absolutely correct. Now let's get to a division example. So we've got c over 5 equals 10. Now, the first thing we have to do is make sure that we isolate the variable. We want to make sure we get the variable c by itself. In order to get the variable c by itself, we're going to have to determine what operation we see and what inverse operation we'll use. So what operation do you see here? Well, this is c over 5, and that represents division. So the opposite of division is multiplication. So the inverse operation is multiplication, and that's what we'll use to solve. Now this is a little bit tricky when you're showing how you cancel, so please bear with me. I promise it's not that bad. So when we're multiplying by 5, we're going to multiply this side times 5. And remember, we should separate the left side and right side. Let's do that real quick. Should have done that first. So I've got the left side of the equal sign and the right side of the equal sign. This will make seeing the balancing part a little bit easier. So now we've got times 5 here, and what's going to happen is the following. We're going to multiply this side by 5. It's kind of like having it as 5 over 1. Okay? And then we're going to multiply this side by 5 as well. Okay? Now remember, we still have to make sure that we balance. And since we have it both on the left side and the right side of the equal sign, this is technically still balanced. I've got my times 5 here. I've got my times 5 here. Now what happens is, this is like having a 5 on top and a 5 on the bottom. So even though you're multiplying by 5, these 5s will cancel out. So let's draw a line going through these 5s. And that will leave us with the variable c all by its lonesome, which is exactly what we want. So this variable c is now all by itself. And I'm going to bring that down. So I got c, and then I'll bring down my equal sign, equals 10 times 5, and that's just 50. So our final answer and our solution to this equation, in other words, the only value that will work, is c equals 50. So now that we know that c equals 50, we're saying that the only value for c that will work is 50. And now let's plug this into the variable c for our check. So let's zoom out. And then we're going to start with the same exact thing as we started with on this side. So we're going to start with c over 5 equals 10. And remember, our solution right here, our solution says that c can only equal 50. So now wherever we see this variable c, we're going to place a 50 instead. So we're going to rewrite this with 50, because that's what c equals, over 5, bring down our equal sign, and bring down our 10. If you want to separate the left side from the right side in the check, you can do that as well. That doesn't make any difference at all. Let's do that too, just to show. So we got the left side and we got the right side. Okay, so now we've got 50 divided by 5. And what's 50 divided by 5? Well, 50 divided by 5 is just 10. So we'll bring that down. We'll bring down our equal sign, and we'll bring down our 10. And therefore, 10 equals 10, so we know our value is correct. And that means our solution c equals 50 is also absolutely correct. Thanks for watching our video on the math review. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. We might use your question in our next video. And if you found this lesson helpful, please make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. And it would really help if you share this and our other videos to any of your social media platforms. See you next time on the Math Review.